So that is how we will do it. I will try to keep it updated in the chat. We will see how my multitasking works out.
Awesome. So we're going to have 3 rounds of questions, starting with a round of questions where candidates will have 2 minutes to answer, a lightning round with a yes or no questions, or a quick 1 to 2 word answer, with a series of questions where candidates will have 30 seconds to answer. We will also, as mentioned, Alex will be timekeeping, and she is an aggressive timekeeper, so she will mute you when your time is up. So with that said, let's get it started, y'all. Starting with opening statements. I'm going to go from my left to right in order, and starting with Faith. 2 minutes for opening statements.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having this forum tonight and for allowing us to lift up this conversation about transportation. So my name is Faith Gibson Hubbard, and I am running to be the next Ward 5 council member because I just love our community so deeply and truly believe in the power of our community. And, you know, it was well over a decade ago that my husband and I pulled up to this very address and started our family here in Ward 5. And one of the things that I really have loved about our ward is our tree-lined streets, the families that are walking down those tree-lined streets, and all of the different amenities that we knew were yet to come. But what I've also seen over this time is that our beautiful ward that we all love so deeply has changed in so many significant ways that we have to make sure that we keep pace with that. So while there are things to love, we know that there are issues in our community that we must address, making sure that we are focused on the cost of housing and keeping residents here in our communities, that we have community-centered development, that we are focused on the issues around environmental justice, increasing issues of safety, both in gun violence and our streets, accessible and services, city services that we have, high quality education from birth throughout life, and so much more. But what I also know is that as a mom, I want our community to be a place that I always feel safe with my children going to and from. I have an 8-year-old son, Colton, who has his own bike, and he is ready to get out there and to hit the trail by himself. But I know that our infrastructure is not ready for that. I also know that as we continue to change as a community, we have to be ready for everyone, and there are different ways that they want to utilize our streets and our community and their safety. So I think that focusing on transportation equity is going to continue to be increasingly important for my family and for yours. And so I look forward to having a deeper discussion this evening around this topic and about how we can continue to move our ward forward in a way that can be reflective of the needs of all of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Gordon?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Gordon Fletcher, and I'm running to become the next Ward 5 DC council member. I'm a 20-year resident of the District of Columbia. My wife and I, Brittany Fletcher, we live in North Michigan Park, where we're homeowners. I was born in Jamaica, grew up in New York, and been in DC since I was 17. I'm 37 now. I've attended American University for undergrad, Florida A&M University for my Juris Doctorate degree, and I wasn't done getting those loans, so I went back to AU for a 3rd degree in public administration, public policy. And I'm a 3-term ANC commissioner, 2-term chair of the Ward 5 Democrats, and it takes a lot of pride. I'm so honored to be able to serve in those capacities for so many years. As an ANC commissioner, where I'm honored to say that I received the endorsement from Greater Washington numerous times. I've served and made sure that we've worked on displacement, made sure that Native Washingtonians are not displaced, made sure that we installed speed bumps and speed humps and 4-way stop signs, and just really enhance and focus on safety, both from a gun violence and community-led policing approach, as well as ensuring that our streets are safer by using every tool in the transportation safety toolbox. I've also helped stop the opening of liquor stores in our neighborhood because we need grocery stores, we need pharmacies, we need sit-down restaurants. And as a Ward 5 Democrats chairman, I was proud to say that we brought in and helped usher in automatic mail-in ballots, something to help preserve and enhance our democracy for all residents in Ward 5 and all over DC. So in these roles, I've had the opportunity to learn, work with so many leaders and grow with so many residents and build deep relationships that I know that I'll be able to use and utilize as your next Ward 5 council member. We got to make sure that we truly realize Vision Zero. And we have to do that by enhancing and enforcing safety measures, making sure that we hold Maryland and Virginia residents, drivers accountable when they're driving on our roads, because we have to make sure that we have safe streets for young residents, children, older residents, and the disabled community. And so I know that as your next Ward 5 council member, I will further advocate for safety, transportation safety for all residents.
Gordon, you're on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Zachary?
Hey everybody, my name is Zachary Parker. I am the current Ward 5 representative on the State Board of Education. I am an educator by background, not a career politician, and I'm running in this council race to be the next Ward 5 council member to build a healthy community. And that is not just an empty slogan, but it speaks to our need to fundamentally shift how we approach education, how we can expand affordable housing, and how we can address rising violence. And when I think of violence, it's not just what is happening on our streets as a result of guns, but also the violence that is happening because of the condition of our streets. I'm really thrilled to have this conversation tonight because I think it's a timely one. Just today, we heard another incident on 15th Street where a bicyclist was hit by a car. And if we are really serious, and if we get really serious, we can all acknowledge that our city's approach to Vision Zero has been lacking, to put it nicely. I'm proud to have put out a Safe Streets platform. I encourage everyone to check it out at zacharyforward5.com. And there are 4 critical parts that I hope to elevate tonight. The first is that we must create a real Vision Zero plan, and that must center on redesigning our streets to prioritize safety over cars. Secondly, we must rethink how we approach enforcement, not just to generate revenue, but to actually change behavior, and to make sure that we are equitable in our approach to enforcement so that we actually change behavior. Thirdly, that we incentivize people to use different modes of transportation. And then lastly, that we expand access to public transportation, bus routes, and make more amenities closer to home. Again, our pathway to a healthier Ward 5 must include safe streets, and that is important for all residents, regardless of your mode of transportation. And again, thank you for having me tonight, and I look forward to a rich conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Zachary. Vincent, we have opening statements, so you got 2 minutes. You got to unmute yourself.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this forum this evening. As you know, I'm Vincent Orange. I had the opportunity to serve Ward 5 for 8 years, 1999 to 2007. And also as an at-large council member from 2011 to 2016. The question that I raise with everyone, if you want to know what I will do, you look at what I've done. And I had the opportunity to walk into Ward 5 along with the citizens of Ward 5 when we were a food desert, car impoundment lots, salt domes, waste transfer stations, group homes, and you name it, drop it in Ward 5. But over an 8-year span, we in Ward 5, we were able to change the trajectory of our ward, and the city followed. We jump-started economic development, we jump-started school modernization, we jump-started recreation centers being renovated as well as created DC Emancipation Day. So I would say to you, this is a very important discussion here today, but it's a discussion that needs a champion. We don't need words. We don't need any more plans. We don't need any more plans. We need to execute. Vision Zero is a plan, but the reason why it doesn't work, because it's not funded. And also the plan, the aspect of the fund of that plan is only to go and get speeding tickets and reduce the speed to 20 miles per hour without putting up any signs. We need to deal with the real infrastructure. The National League of Cities have put out 7 ways to embark upon real pedestrian safety, to have crosswalks, visibility enhancement, road diets, road raised crosswalks. The young lady that died in our ward, Allison Hart, on a late night, just think if that intersection had been lit, or if that intersection was a raised intersection, she would be here with us today. The gentleman, Mr. Ramos, that got killed at 10th and Michigan Avenue Northeast by a shuttle bus. He was actually in the intersection.
Vincent, you're over time. Thank you.
Well, I'll just wrap up and say that we need a champion.
Vincent,
You have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Thank you so much.
Vincent, one quick thing. Alex is she's going to be very aggressive tonight with the mutant. So just FYI, when you're overtime, I think you missed it, but when you're overtime, she's gonna mute folks. So just a heads up. She's gonna post in the chat when you have 30 seconds, 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Can we get 10 seconds? That'd be fine.
Then we'd all be here all night, as much as I love hanging out with y'all. You can hear the ding sound effect that I have, right?
I didn't hear anything, but that's fine.
Okay. I will turn up the volume. Thank you.
And Alex, just so you know, I didn't hear anything either.
Okay, great. That is helpful feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, I can work with that. Thanks.
Awesome. So we're gonna go into long answer. You have 90 seconds for this one. So candidates will have 90 seconds to answer the long answer questions, and we have 3 long answer questions, and we're gonna start with Zach, and then we're gonna go from this way on up. So the question is, giving people more transportation options is good. What will you do to make Ward 5 more multimodal so people can get around in non-car modes of transportation? This is your opportunity to tell us your transportation vision. Starting with you, Zachary.
Yeah, no, thank you. I support innovative approaches to expanding transportation. Councilmember Allen has a proposal that I support, which is essentially giving people money so that they can use public transportation. It's also advocating and pushing for increased bus routes. Recently, there have been drawbacks on bus routes, and we need to reverse that pattern. And I'm glad to have joined neighbors in advocating for pushing back on that and that actually happening. But it's also, again, about bringing more amenities close to home. If you go throughout Ward 5, there's many communities that don't have grocery stores or coffee shops or restaurants in their community, which causes them to get in their cars and drive across town. And something that we don't talk about nearly enough is making sure that we hold accountable outsiders that are speeding oftentimes through our communities. And so while that is not necessarily incentivizing Ward 5 neighbors to use different transportation modes, I think if people felt safe to bike or had access to more public bike resources or scooters, what have you, and there were more community-based amenities, they would take advantage of them. And so I think it's a multi-pronged approach, making sure people have resources to use public transportation, increasing bus routes in different modes, and making sure that we hold accountable drivers from Maryland and Virginia that are often speeding through our streets.
Thank you. Vincent, so this is your opportunity to tell us your transportation vision. What is your vision for transportation for the board?
First of all, in Ward 5, you really have to know Ward 5 to understand what Ward 5 needs in terms of transportation. It's a balancing act. You know, in Ward 60 and Precinct 66, 68, those are neighborhoods, houses and homes. Those folks have access to their vehicles. But then you have other areas in the ward where it's more dense, it's more of a younger population. Those will be the ones that would be able to get on a bike and bike around. I'm not going to ask a 65-year-old or 75-year-old person to get on a bike. I'm going to make sure that everyone has the right mode of transportation. And we have a unique opportunity at the Armed Forces Retirement Home, where there will be 80 acres of development. That'll be a great way to look at the transportation routes, as well as directly across the street, Macmillan Reservoir, 25 acres of development. So we need to plan what it's going to look like. It's going to be more development at New York and Bladensburg Road. Those are the opportunities to make sure that we get transportation right and that we have bike routes, bus routes, and things of that nature.
Thank you, Vincent. Gordon, what's your transportation vision for the ward?
You know, Ward 5 is just so diverse. So we have to make sure that we are providing transportation options for older residents, younger residents, and everyone in between. We have to address transportation inequity, accessibility to safe, efficient, affordable, and diverse means of transportation. We have to make sure that we have car-free transportation options, such as bike shares. such as metro bus routes. We need more bus routes. I meet residents all the time that say, Gordon Fletcher, it takes me, so long to get from Fort Totten to Ivy City because there's only one bus route pretty much throughout the day. We also have to recognize that Lincoln Road and other major thoroughfares in Ward 5, those are areas that need or could benefit from protected bike lanes that will increase safer transportation, safer ways for students to get to and from school and residents as well. We have to make sure that we do things to reduce the congestion in the major traffic corridors all throughout Ward 5. Making sure we have low-cost bike share options, especially for residents 18 and up. But we also have to have that balance because my neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Rice, they need their parking spaces. I help them with their groceries, all the time whenever I can. I shovel their driveway as well. So their parking space in front of their home is needed. So we need bike shares for younger, diverse communities, but we also need some parking spaces and increased bus routes. We're a diverse ward. We can make sure we do this right for all residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Faith, what is your transportation vision for the ward?
So I think we've heard a lot about the diversity of our ward and also just how large our ward is. And in those different needs, we do have to be focused that as we are making different choices, that we make sure those choices are accessible and meet the needs of our different neighbors. So where I live in Woodridge, I have to walk up a pretty steep hill to get to a bus stop. That bus stop, when I'm standing out there, sometimes alone, you don't know the reliability of what's coming. So I think we have to make sure that there's reliable service. And also one of the things that we don't often talk about is safety of service. I have been on Metro and I have been attacked on Metro, and I haven't had someone that I could report that to or make sure that I would feel safe the next time. So I think we need reliability and safety, and also just to change the perception that our neighbors have of the services that are available. We also have to really keep an eye too on the fact that not all neighborhoods have the same level of accessibility. So definitely bringing, more bus routes and options to communities is extremely important, but also additional amenities. I live off of Rhode Island Avenue. I love Good Foods Market. I love being able to take my kids to Rita's, places that we can easily walk to. So thinking about the diversity of our community, adding in different types of transportation to meet the need, but also knowing that sometimes people are going to need a car. And so parking is also something that we have to think about for certain neighbors to make sure that, again, we are addressing the diversity of needs of neighbors who want to bike, drive, and get on public transportation.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our next question, and we're going to start with you, Vincent.
And I do just want to confirm, is the bell audible now? Great.
So we're going to start with you, Vincent. Generally, DDOT has moved more slowly in implementing new initiatives than the council and advocates would like. And the district's Vision Zero goal so far has been a failure. What will you do to hold DDOT accountable? And what transformative policies will you push in your first year in office to move the district closer to its Vision Zero goal? Starting with you, Vincent.
Yeah. Well, as the council member coming onto the council, I'm the only candidate here that's going to lay claim to the position that Councilmember McDuffie currently holds, and that's chair of the Committee on Economic Development, Business and Planning. When you have a chairmanship, then you can bargain. And it's like, if I got this committee, it's like, Mayor, nothing is going to move that you want in the area of economic development unless I get these particular things. I want to make Ward 5 the pilot for pedestrian safety. I'm going to get dollars allocated to make sure that we get something moving. You cannot have a Vision Zero plan. Sounds good on paper, but it has not reduced any fatalities. And if you look at the dollars are not there. Now, Councilmember Nadeau and I believe Councilmember Pinto have introduced two great bills. One is Walk Without Worry Amendment Act. The other one is Safe Routes to School Expansion Regulation Amendment Act. So it's already in the council, but it's not moving. And so these things, you need a champion in order for it to move. When I was in Ward 5, I was the champion for economic development. I was the champion for school modernization. I was the champion for getting those recreation centers open. And you have to know how to maneuver and make it work, get the deals done, and get it done. And that's what I plan to do for the residents of Ward 5.
Thank you. Gordon.
Yeah, this is another great question. You know, we have to make sure that we're holding agencies such as DDOT more accountable. They have to provide more community input, more community engagement, sufficient, consistent community engagement. As a 3-term ANC commissioner, I've seen so many times residents are just dissuaded and dejected by what DDOT says. You know, they say one thing at the beginning of a development or a construction or renovation or a plan, and then by the end of it, it's a completely different project that no one really received notice about. You know, we could talk about the residents at the McMillan Park, Friends of McMillan Park. You know, they over there have said so many times, we don't even know what DDOT is planning. So we have to hold DDOT and agencies such as those much more accountable. I want to make sure that we utilize our ANCs for gathering surveys and gathering mailers and gathering information that we can use as residents and also me as the next Ward 5 council member. I want to make sure that we install more traffic hawk signals. I want to make sure that we have more signage like we have in Ward 2 and Ward 3 to help reduce traffic issues, or help reduce traffic fatalities. These are some of the revolutionary things that we want to do within Ward 5. It sounds simple, but in Ward 5, we don't have these simple mechanisms to increase safety for all residents. We also have to make sure that we provide more resources for residents to understand what DDOT is doing. So again, those are some of the ideas I have as next Ward 5 council member. Thank you.
Faith.
So there's nothing like the lived experience in a neighborhood to know exactly what you need. And there's also nothing like sharing your lived experience and someone telling you that that's not so. So I believe that while it's really important to have additional accountability, I think that we need much more proactive action from DDOT within communities on a regular basis. To not just come out and do a traffic study investigation, but to listen to the lived experience of community members and also leverage the expertise that I have heard from many neighbors about what they need. We also know that there are options that are already happening all across the city that should be options that are available to us. So 4-way stops should not be something that we should have to fight over. That is something that we've seen other places. We have seen how traffic has been calmed. We have heard from ANC commissioners as well as community members and civic associations about what is needed in their communities. So I think we have to make the process smoother. And we have to bring those folks who are responsible for doing the work with our communities to the communities in a proactive way. I've seen most of the actions be reactive and really frustrating, just as many have noted, that makes you want to give up on the process. So we need community engagement more proactively, and then also the input of community members on an ongoing basis to make sure that we are getting things that meet the needs of our lived experiences in our communities each and every day.
Thank you. Zachary?
Yeah, there are 2 chief responsibilities for any council member, in my opinion. One is conducting oversight and holding district agencies accountable, and the other is legislating. DDOT is no exception. The issue across agencies connect to what I call the 3 C's: community engagement, coordination, and communication. All 3 of those are lacking across agencies, and that is the same for DDOT. As a council member, I would aggressively work with DDOT leadership, but also work to hold them accountable and to clear out outstanding requests. On the legislation front, I've already led in that space. Mr. Orange referenced the Safe Routes to School Amendment Act. That was actually introduced by Councilmember Louis George. And that legislation, which was co-introduced with 11 of her colleagues, was informed by a resolution that was unanimously approved and introduced by me on the State Board of Education. And for those that may not be familiar, that legislation calls for safety traffic measures around all of DC's public schools. And so as Ward 5's only current elected official in this race, I'm not talking about what I did 20 years ago. I'm talking about what I've done now, and that is moving through the council today. And so again, as the next Ward 5 council member, I will work aggressively to hold district agencies, including DDOT, accountable, but also to be a leader in pushing for safer streets for all of our residents.
Thank you, Zachary. So we're going to start with Gordon for this next question. We all know that sometimes, folks in the community are a little bit hesitant to change. So installing protected bike lane infrastructure, installing protected bicycle infrastructure can sometimes mean the removal of on-street parking or travel lanes for people and cars. What is your strategy?
Infrastructure, of course, also.
What is your strategy for working with the community when there are conflicts like this? Start with you, Gordon.
I think that's a great question, and it just rings core to my service to the ward as a commissioner. A lot of times I tell residents, I tell folks, it's the messenger. The messenger a lot of times makes the message a lot more palatable, a lot more relatable to a resident, to a constituent. And so it's about bringing various stakeholders and community members together, ANCs, civic associations, community leaders, DDOT, other government agencies. These are things that I've done. We have to build consensus. We have to build community input. We do that through time, through consistent engagement. This is what we've done. I've done as a commissioner by installing speed bumps, by installing four-way stop signs. Just recently, within this past week, with the help of Carmen Williams, North Michigan Park Civic Association president, who is a supporter of mine, we got a traffic hawk signal installed on the corner of South Dakota and 8th Street. Why? Because I have a blind resident that lives in my single member district. And it's very critical that him and other members who are disabled, older residents, young families, older residents like Mr. and Mrs. Rice, who are 86 and 87, live right next door to me. We have to make sure that we provide mechanisms that's safe for everyone. So I'm proud to say that we brought in a traffic hawk signal. How do we do this? We worked with DDOT. We worked with the ANCs. We worked with various civic association leaders as well to do this. This is what I will do as your next Ward 5 council member. Bring folks together. Thank you.
Faith?
So we need to do much of what we're doing right now as candidates. We need to knock on doors, get out there, let people know that changes could be coming to their community and that we want to hear from them. I think a lot about what I have heard from neighbors about the protected bike lanes on West Virginia Avenue. And there are a lot of thoughts about parking that was lost, about not being a part of the process. And people often feel resistant when they just feel like they were not included or not heard. So I think we need to make sure that, again, on that proactive front, as we are getting ready to move into a space like protected bike lanes or taking away parking that we know is important to many of our neighbors. Just in our community, we haven't always had the types of investments that we deserve. And so we've had to drive to those things. And the loss of that can feel like a huge loss, like a death, right? Like we haven't been included in the process. So I think it just means much more robust community engagement and doing the things that we know we need to do, just like right now when we're trying to ask people for their votes. We have to get out here, we have to knock on doors, we have to get feedback from neighbors who may never come to those meetings, and we need to take that into account. We also need to help them see that bike lanes could be for them too. And also the safety and protective value that it also could give to pedestrians. So we need to make sure that it doesn't just seem like it's coming from the perspective of the biker, but from our entire community. Like, why would that be of great value? But that comes back to really robust engagement, knowing the community and not being afraid of the community to get out there and make sure everyone's voice is included.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll repeat the question in case folks, I'm sorry if y'all didn't hear me. I know this is going to be recorded, we're going to send it out. So folks who are listening, the question is, we all know that people generally don't like change sometimes. Installing protected bicycle infrastructure can sometimes mean the removal of on-street parking or travel lanes for people and cars. What is your strategy for working with the community when there are conflicts like this? Zachary?
Yeah, we need a council member that's going to bring our community together. I actually believe that a lot of the hype over bike lanes versus parking spots is overblown. And in fact, I think bike lanes have become such a toxic term and represent a feeling that people aren't addressing. When I go to community meetings, what I sense is that people are just tired of change happening to them and change happening to their communities without their input, without their engagement, instead of it being change happening alongside them or with their input. And so one, I just think it's important that we have a council member that is going to bring our communities together and not pit communities or parts of our community against one another. Secondly, it's about building trust. DDOT has made commitments, for instance, on 8th Street and many other areas, and then have reneged on those plans. And that does not engender trust. At the same time, there are communities where natives have long lived here, have grown up here, and then you have newer residents, let's say it that way, who come in to tell them how things ought to be. I think as a council member, leadership starts at the top, and you need to foster the atmosphere where people come to the table, not to talk at each other, but to work together, figure out what works best for the community. I am a big supporter of advocating and moving forward with the plans already on the books, like our Move DC plans. There's already been robust engagement around that. And so let's move forward where there's agreement. Let's hold DDOT accountable to the things they've already agreed to. And then,
sorry.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Vincent?
Yeah, well, I believe, it's community engagement. It's not that the leadership starts at the top. The leadership starts with the community. And when I was a council member, we worked with the community. The community had just as much power as anyone else. And especially when you're getting 100 people turning out for all the engagements. We had crime summits, we had economic development summits, school modernization summits, and everything that occurred, there was buy-in. I think in Ward 5, now is the time to kind of step back and see where we are. Let's evaluate what lanes we have. Are they appropriate? Are they working? Where else should we place bike lanes? And where should there just be nice, quiet neighborhoods for those residents that are in those neighborhoods, and really there's not a need there. So we need to review where we are, because a lot has transpired in the last 5 to 7 years without real input. And I think that's the real problem. This all came from the top without really working with the community and letting them know when it's going to happen and when you're going to have these implementation dates. So, that's my style. It's been successful and it continues to be successful. When they tried to do the land grab in Ward 5, got 34 Ward 5 leaders together, got their input, and then we took action. So it's getting the people together, see what we're going to do together, take action. And you were involved when we got the $15 minimum wage. Getting people together, we're not waiting on anyone. It's strength in numbers, and that's how we do it.
Thank you. I'm surprised you remember that, but I appreciate that. That was a long time ago. $15 minimum wage campaign. All right, let's move on to yes or no questions. Lightning round. We're gonna have for the lightning round, we're gonna have yes or no. So yes, you raise your thumb up. No, obviously you raise your thumb down. We're also gonna have quick one-word response questions as well, and I'll let you know when it's a one-word response question. But first one is a thumbs up or thumbs down question. So it's two-part. Well, first, do you support planned bike lanes on 8th Street Northeast? Yes or no? Okay, so we got yeses, and then Vince is keeping his thumb down. All right. Do you support planned bike lanes on 7th Street Northeast between Franklin and Monroe Street Northeast to connect the Matt Brents Trail? Okay, so is Faith, is that a yes or yes? Okay, so everyone's a yes. All right.
You just ask these questions that require us to think, and then you're like, yes or no. Tell us yes or no right now. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. So next question. Restaurants have set up outdoor dining areas around the district where streets have been closed and tables have been set up in the streets, called streeteries. Should the district make these streeteries a permanent feature, which would encourage restaurants to make significant investments in those areas? Yes or no? So do you think they should make streeteries permanent? So.
Can we elaborate?
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to elaborate?
I would just say, yes, I'm open to it. I don't think it should be mandated. It should be an option for those who want to take advantage of it.
Okay,
I
go ahead, Faith.
Yeah, straighterries, we know have been a lifeblood for many restaurants during this time, right, to stay afloat. And it has worked well for many communities, but also I just think we need to reevaluate, what does the community need? Also, what does the business need? And how can we work on that together to make sure it's an option, but not to mandate it, but make it something we can work on together.
Yeah, and I agree as well. I think the mandate, that's a little excessive, because I believe there's some neighborhoods that you may need some of those parking spaces back, and so I think it's a conversation that needs to be had beforehand. But there are areas where I definitely unequivocally support it. That's why I do this. So that's a tough one. But just like a lot of things, community engagement will help bring me to an absolute answer on that one. Thank you.
Vincent, I'm gonna give you maybe a couple of seconds. Do you think street rates should be permanent?
I'm not so sure they should be permanent, but I would say the ones that exist now appear to be working well. And I think we should evaluate what's going on in those locations and kind of see what the community thinks about it. And anyone that would like to, have that as the option, that they go through a process to make their locations a street eatery as well. But to mandate it, I'm not in favor of that. I think it needs to be more input, and there needs to be a reason why there should be a mandate.
Okay.
Well, this is great. We can just set up a task force for y'all after the campaign and figure it out.
Hey, that's a good idea, Alex.
All right. I think Jeremiah, back to questions. I'm relieving you of the stress of the ding for this because I know it's a quick one. I'm looking at about 5 to 10 seconds for your up or down. So just so you know. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
So this one is also a quick answer question. So this isn't a yes or no. So name a location in Ward 5 that you would like to be made a permanent open car-free space for residents. So starting with you, if there's no space that you can name right now, that's fine. But name a location in Ward 5 that you would like to be made a permanent open car-free space for residents. Starting with you, Zachary.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking less about car-free spaces and more about like, how do we connect lanes? So like the branch trail, so that we can get more access across Ward 5. And so I guess I'm not fully answering that question, but I know there were recent plans that were announced. And I think still only roughly 20% or less of Ward 5 is connected. And so less car-free space and more about how do we connect different parts of the ward so people can get around more freely and safely.
Okay, Vincent?
Yeah, I could not suggest to you at this point a car-free location, especially on a permanent basis. I think things of that nature needs to be tried on a trial basis to see how it works. And if it doesn't create another problem. Traffic is horrendous. I was running late to get to my office to make it here. It used to take 15 minutes to get downtown. Now it's 45 minutes. And especially, with all the traffic and no spaces and everybody on top of each other. So we really need to plan this and work this out so it can be very efficient and very effective for all involved.
Gordon?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm going to agree with others there. I believe that we need more connectivity. I've been on bike rides with WABA, and I've seen the lack of connectivity in our ward. So we need that. But I would say along Lincoln Road, that's an area where I believe we could install a very long stretch of protected bike lanes. And that would also increase safety and safer streets for students and residents alike. So that's what I would say. But we just need to increase connectivity. And as a biker myself, I know me and many others would agree with that. So thank you.
Faith?
So my mind went to commercial corridors and maybe how we could close off some spaces. I originally thought of Union Market and like 4th Street, but not permanently, because I think there are times during the week that may make sense, or even during the farmers markets. There are times when that might make sense in order to expand opportunity for economic purposes. But I would probably also agree that like on a complete permanent basis, I think our ward may not quite be there yet, but maybe let's try it and see what could work.
Okay, staying with you, Faith. Is there a location in Ward 5 that you would like to see a protected bus-only lane installed? Starting with you, Vic.
Rhode Island Avenue. I live off of Rhode Island Avenue, and I know we were really excited when like the G9 came, but it could go very slowly. We want bus lanes to be in places where we want to keep people moving and help them to see the value. So I think about Rhode Island Avenue, or even in, yeah. So I would say start with Rhode Island Avenue as a trial.
Okay. Gordon, is there a location in Ward 5 that you'd like to see a protected bus-only lane installed?
Yeah, I think North Capitol Street might be a good area. Parts of New York Avenue would be a good area as well, and potentially even parts of South Dakota Avenue. Major thoroughfares where there's heavy traffic, but we can increase other modes of transportation and help everyone. So those are some areas that come to mind instantly.
Thank you. Vincent, any areas where you would like to see a bus-only lane?
Well, I would say those that have been identified, I think would be extremely problematic. I mean, to talk about doing it on South Dakota Avenue, and then, you know, how does the garbage trucks get around? Is everybody now in the alleys? You know, these kind of questions, they really need to be really examined to see what would be the impact. You know, and like Rhode Island Avenue is a very busy area, but it's also not that wide. You know, to have those type of lanes, you really, you know, you have those cities that have wide streets and they can accommodate that. So we really need to look at, you know, what is the best size of a street to accommodate that. And if you don't want to accommodate, if you were to relieve, you know, a lane, what will be the impact? How long is it going to take a person to move around? And also, how many bikes are actually using that particular location? So, you know, for me, I think it needs to be more of an examination, not to be against it, but just I don't want to create other problems. And I know there are a lot of streets where, you know, folks only have access from their alley, and that tends to be problematic as well. Michigan Avenue, I mean.
Vincent, I'm gonna wind you down a little bit there since you all had about a minute.
All right.
Zachary, is there a location that you would like to see a bus-only lane?
Yeah, I would support those lanes on our major arterials. And it's both to increase access and to make sure we have a more efficient transportation system, but it's also to reduce the ability for people to treat our highways or streets like highways, like North Capitol, like New York, like Rhode Island and South Dakota. So I don't think it's a bad thing that it would reduce traffic, because that would in fact save lives, and perhaps would incentivize people in using public transportation if they knew it was reliable, safe, and efficient. So looking at all of the major arterials and mapping out a plan, which is already in the Move DC trajectory, like how can we move towards that, which is already on the books.
Thank you. So this is a yes or no question. Do you support the recent bill before the Transportation Committee that will ban right turn on reds and permit the so-called Idaho stop? So there's a bill that would ban right turn on reds as well as permit the so-called Idaho stop. Do you support this bill? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
You know, I support it, but you know, there's also new tech.
Vincent, I'm gonna have to mute you. This was a short response. Thank you.
But there's new technology that addresses that.
So yes, banning it. I got
yeah, along with the new.
I'm sorry, it's a short answer.
We just want to tell you. We want to tell you more.
I know. This is a super hot topic for conversation. And we have a couple of other questions, and I'm sure this is going to be circled back for the audience question. For those listening, the Idaho stop is where people on bikes can treat stop signs as a yield sign. Totally hear you. I'm wanting to chat about it more. I think this question was just to indicate how you would ultimately vote up or down on these bills were you on the council and they were in front of you at the final reading. So thank you.
Awesome. So we're gonna move over to the short answer. So you have 30 seconds. Wait. They want to see who said yes. Who said yes? Could you do it again? Okay, Faith, Gordon, and Zachary said yes, and then Vincent Orange was unsure. Okay, so we're gonna move over to the 30-second questions, y'all. So you have 30 seconds to answer this question. We're going to start with you, Gordon. What are your plans to ensure children in the ward can safely walk, bike, and scoot to schools?
This goes back to a previous statement. We have to ensure more protected bike lanes, especially along school routes. And that will increase safety and also promote a healthy modes of transportation for our young people. Our young people are our future. What happened to Allison Hard and so many others within Ward 5 is horrendous and should not happen again. And if we input protected bike lanes in the right areas of our ward, it will help increase safety and reduce traffic fatalities. Thank you.
Faith?
So as a mom of two children who thinks about this quite a lot when my kids want to go out riding, I think we need to do things to increase visibility, to also just to slow our traffic down. And I think through many of the things we talked about, raised crosswalks and enforcement and so many other things, and protective bike lanes where it makes sense, but also just a public campaign around keeping an eye out for all of those around us and how we use the roads. I think it's also really important to just make people be mindful of that, because if you don't have children, if you're not keeping an eye on that, you'll be zooming through our communities in ways that are unsafe.
Thank you. Zachary?
Yeah, it's continuing to champion the issues that I've already been championing. Again, the Safe Routes to School Act is something I was proud to help inform. I'm proud to support, and we need more of that. And again, that calls for safety traffic measures around all of our public schools. What we're also not talking about is the ways in which violence is out of control. So traffic violence is one issue. Gun violence is a completely other. As a council member, I would work closely with the Deputy Mayor of Education to expand safe passage for all of our young students so that they can walk, bike, and just get to and from school safely.
Thank you. Vincent? You unmute yourself.
The question was specifically on children walking, biking, and being able to be in the community safely. You know, when you look at the accidents that have occurred, most of them occur in the intersections. And that's why it's so important to focus in on those intersections right now, to raise those intersections and to have them light up. And those are things that's low hanging fruit. That's something that DDOT should be able to address right now. So, you know, we don't have to go after the whole enchilada. Let's start in some places that we can start getting things done and getting them done now, and we can actually fund it, and it makes sense.
Vincent, you're at time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. We're going to start with you, Faye, for this next question. Prior to running for Ward 5 council seat, what have you done to make Washington, D.C. a safer place for people who walk and bike around the city? So this is your opportunity to talk a little bit about your experience. So prior to running for the Ward 5 council seat, what have you done to make Washington, D.C. a safer place for people who walk and bike around the city? Sorry.
Yeah. So thank you for that question. Is it still 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
Okay. So in 2015, I was appointed as the first chief student advocate by the State Board of Education and all of the members. And before Safe Passage was something that's so popular right now, my office at that time actually started focusing on the safe passage of students to walk and bike to school, also to stay safe from gun violence, and also to be safe throughout the day. And so I think focusing on our children first and seeing where we have moved now with money around safe passage and so much more, and the attention that it's getting was the work that I was focused on around making sure that our children and our schools were safe places for children to get to and from.
Thank you, Faye. Zachary?
Yeah, through my work on the State Board of Education, I am currently on the school parking zone committee through DDOT. I also joined community members in advocating against cuts to bus routes. I also joined forces with DEC to make sure that our homeless youth in Ward 5, and we have a lot, had ample bus access to get to school safely. And I've just been a consistent champion for safer streets way before running for this council member's seat.
Vincent, before you running for this seat, what did you do? Tell us about your experience, Vincent.
Well, I was president of the DC Chamber of Commerce, and we always have activities in the wards. I have a granddaughter that will be 5 years old next month. She actually attends school in Ward 5. So a lot of times I'm walking her to school and picking her up. And it's just making sure that people understand that there are children in the neighborhood. I used to host the Halloween parties for children. I have the children in my backyard because it's huge, and just making sure that there are safe environments for people to utilize. I also pushed, I was one that did Turkey Thicket, but I didn't stop there. I pushed to make sure that we get the various equipment there so young people can go there and participate and play. So it's just—
Vincent, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to stop you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vincent. Gordon?
I think the role of an ANC commissioner, a 3-term ANC commissioner to myself, allows me to work deeply and learn how to make and help ensure that my community is safer. And that's why I've installed various, not just 1 or 2, but various speed bumps and speed humps, because there's a difference. I've also installed raised crosswalks. I've also installed 4-way stop signs. And I want to be able to do this not only in ANC 5A, but all of Ward 5. I have the experience, I understand relationships, and these are things I've done in those roles already. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. So we're gonna start with you, Zachary, this time for this question right here. Do you support removing police from all or some traffic enforcement? And how will you balance the need for traffic enforcement and equity while in office? Starting with you, Zach.
Yes, this is something that would take a lot of planning and engagement, but I do support transitioning enforcement to DDOT, which I think is a more appropriate agency to handle traffic enforcement. And that isn't because for MPD, traffic stops account for the #1 amount of their time, or the most of their time. And we know the more encounters that folk have with the police, the more there are chances that things can go left. Again, we need ample engagement, funding, and planning to make something like that happen. But yes, in theory, I do support that, and it would be something I would push for.
Vincent?
Well, I think for me, it's something that I would examine. I would also be somewhat fearful for DDOT personnel to get heavily involved in traffic enforcement without being trained. You have no idea who you're going to encounter when you walk up to someone's car, and especially to write a ticket or to just be involved in what other activities are taking place. So I would have to be very, very comfortable that the person that is going to address that particular vehicle, that they are well trained and they know exactly what they're doing, because we can find ourselves with more fatalities than we bargained for.
Gordon?
It's known that within the District of Columbia and many urban cities across our country that Black and brown people of color are disproportionately stopped in high numbers by police officers. So I do support changing, reallocating certain functions from MPD to DDOT. But I do also state and agree that they need to be properly trained, because without that training, we could be placing an issue from one agency and placing it to another one. And we're talking about individuals' lives here. So we need training, but yes, reallocation for sure. Thank you.
Faith?
I do think it's something that needs to be examined and perhaps something phased in so that you can make sure that whoever is doing the traffic stop is prepared to be able to engage with residents and neighbors in a real meaningful way. I know for many neighbors right now, they see police that are there and they wish that they would take certain actions in order to stop bad traffic behavior. So I think it's something that needs to be examined, and also the appropriate training and phasing in to make sure that whoever is doing the enforcement can be prepared.
Thank you. So moving on to our second question, we're going to start with you. Our last question for the short answer before we move on to audience questions. Starting with you, Vincent. Use this opportunity to tell us what your strategies are on slowing drivers down. So what are some of your, use this opportunity to tell us what your strategies are on slowing drivers down. So this has been a really big concern from Ward 5 residents. We got a lot of questions from Ward 5 residents about drivers speeding. And so what are you going to do to slow drivers down? Starting with you, Vincent.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think this has been asked and answered all night. I'm going to embark upon 7 ways to increase safety, pedestrian safety, and slowing cars down by utilizing the 7 steps for pedestrian safety that's outlined by the National League of Cities. It has done an excellent study on what should be implemented in these cities. In Ward 5 in particular, how we're going to slow folks down is to convince the mayor and others that we need to have a pilot program, and we can start it in 5. I have my ideas. I would adjust the intersections right away, light those intersections up, raise those intersections, and then move on to something else. Unfortunately, Alex, you can.
Vincent, you are over time. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say I'm gonna have to leave. I have an 8 o'clock sharp stop, and thank you all very much for giving me an
So rude of me. So sorry. Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Gordon?
Can you just repeat it one more time, just so I hear it properly? Yeah, thank you.
What are your strategies for slowing drivers down?
Okay, let's start though. So enforcement, that's number one thing. I talk to residents all over Ward 5 every day. Maryland and Virginia drivers owe us over $20 million in traffic fines. And so reciprocity is something that we have to enforce. Maryland, Virginia drivers come to our roads, there are accidents all the time, and there's no enforcement. So we have to do that. We also have to make sure we have proper signage, flashing signals, letting drivers know that you're approaching a stop sign. Those 2 things alone, enforcement and more signage, will help reduce traffic fatalities and increase transportation safety. Thank you.
Faith?
I think we need to enforce the things that we know work, that we've seen work in other communities. My kids go to a school that's off of Maryland Avenue Northeast. I have seen how that road has changed in order to slow people down. So I think we need to implement the plans that we know are needed within communities to make it undesirable for people to use our residential streets to zoom through. And we have to slow traffic down, and we have plans for that. And so implementing those plans and oversight of those plans and making sure that they are funded is what is going to allow that to happen.
Cool. Zachary?
Yeah, I would highlight the 4 aspects of my Safe Streets plan. The first is around a real Vision Zero plan, really approaching the redesign of our streets. I think the deck over project, for instance, in Bloomingdale is a real opportunity for us in that respect. It's also making sure that we hold DDOT accountable to addressing the requests from neighbors that are often lagging or closed out without being addressed. Secondly is around enforcement. We've talked at length about reciprocity, but also making sure that we expand DPW's ability to boot cars and making sure that we hold repeat offenders accountable. There was something today about
Zach, I'm gonna cut you off for time. Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, we're at 8 o'clock. We have until, 8:30 with audience questions. I do realize that some of you may have some prior commitments, if that is the case. Otherwise, we are happy to have you here until 8:30, if that's okay, so that we can get to some audience questions.
Good to go here.
Cool. We just want to keep you all night. So yeah.
Right, because we're not busy, right?
You'll see my kids in a minute. You'll see them in a minute if you want to stay here all night.
I gotta cook dinner tonight for my wife, so let me, okay.
I'm gonna ask your kids and your wife about their opinions on traffic safety. Sorry.
We just got 4 questions, audience questions, y'all, and then we're gonna wrap up and get into closing statements, and that'll be it for tonight. First question is,
we're in 30-second responses still, so.
And these are from all Ward 5 residents. What does your ideal North Capitol Street or Rhode Island Avenue look like to you? What does an ideal North Capitol Street or Rhode Island Avenue look like to you 5 to 10 years down the road? Starting with you, Zachary.
Again, I think the deck over is a great opportunity to redesign North Capitol, which is treated right now as a highway, having ample green space for community, making sure there is protected bus lanes, making sure that people that want to ride bikes can do so, and that we just rethink and restrict the lanes there. Same for Rhode Island. I think making sure that there is protected bus lanes would be important on Rhode Island.
Gordon?
Yeah, great question. I support the Capitol Deckover project, North Capitol Deckover project. I believe that it will connect Bloomingdale in a way that's never been before. I believe it will also increase traffic safety. I believe that we need to have, more bike lanes anywhere around that neighborhood that we can. But one of the things, because I've listened to a lot of residents in that neighborhood, we also need streetlights on the roads off of North Capitol. I've heard from a lot of residents that it's very difficult to get onto North Capitol in a safe mechanism, safe way. So we need more street lights for residents who want to get onto North Capitol that live off of North Capitol Street. So between the Deckover project, getting more street lights, and having protected bike lanes.
Gordon, I'm gonna wind you down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Faith?
So both of those streets are, gateways into our city and then into our community. So I think giving them the respect that they deserve in order for them to be truly multimodal. So seeing bus lanes, seeing the ability of pedestrians to be able to utilize, particularly Rhode Island Avenue, with all the economic corridors that are located there. So multimodal. And I'm excited about that, living off of Rhode Island Avenue. But two, I agree with the Deckover. It's a beautiful project and I think will bridge the community, but also, I think we're going to have to think even more about North Capitol as it has different purposes.
Cool. We have one question submitted from someone who is in the audience right now. There's been a lot of focus on reducing fatalities, but for every one fatality, there's at least 10 more of us with life-changing injuries from crashes. What do you plan to do to support the growing population of people who have been experienced traffic violence in life-changing ways? And so if there's ever a family or individual who's experienced traffic violence in your ward, what do you see your role as the council member to support that individual or that family? Starting with you, Faith.
And this is a tough one. I think that as a council member, you have to be present and to, again, be with that person through that experience and to lift that up and to be a champion around what legislative fixes can be there and also enforcement that can be there. I remember trying to cross Florida Avenue one day in order to go to a childcare center that was opening to help a friend, and I was almost hit by a car. And there's nothing like feeling like you can't freely move. So I think it's continuing to be a champion and to connect with neighbors around the solutions that are possible and to move those solutions forward.
Gordon?
Yeah, this is definitely a tough thing because, as a council member, a loss to anyone within Ward 5 is a loss to me, a loss to our family. And so that's how I would take it, So I would want to first go and make the family, make that individual know that I'm there, that my office is there for them. I want to find out what resources, what health issues, anything that we can assist with, just from a community perspective. So residents know that we are here for you. We got you. I got you. My office got you. So it's just about giving that common touch, that human touch, more than anything else. This is not about legislation. It's about just community interaction. And so that's how I would approach this and figure out what they need from me and my office. And we would do our best to find to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're about to say time up.
I was about to say time up.
I got it.
Zachary?
Yes, being present as a council member, but I think people have heard a lot of talk. They want action. And so I would push DDOT and fund to make sure that we can provide long-term support. I've also advocated for community-based mental health services because that is trauma to almost have a life and death experience. And then lastly, I think using data very innovatively to redesign streets. And so if we have a strip of land like on Florida Avenue, where there are reoccurring accidents, making sure that we use that as an opportunity to redesign the streets where those incidents are happening. We should not have to wait till someone dies to jump to action.
Thank you, Zachary. So this is starting with you, Gordon. How often will you intervene in DDOT decision-making and why? Did there ever come a point where you believe that you should be, that you would intervene in DDOT decision-making and why? Starting
as much as humanly possible, as much as needed. DDOT needs that accountability. That's just what I've realized when it comes to DDOT, right? We have to make sure that they are doing what they say they're going to do and when they're going to do that. I'm a very hands-on public servant. Residents in ANC 5A and Ward 5 Democrats who are active within the ward know that. You know, I'm a champion of the people, and so we have to make sure that DDOT understands that they have to come before the ANCs. They have to come before the civic associations. They have to come before the community. They can't just do things. That's what I would do. Thank you.
Zachary?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. How often will you intervene in DDOT decision-making and why?
Yeah, again, I think oversight and accountability is a council member's chief responsibility. I don't necessarily think you need to have an adversarial relationship with agencies to get the job done. And so it depends. I would first and want to work collaboratively with the agency head, but I think it's also about holding the agency accountable to meeting the needs of residents. And we can do that by first making sure DDOT honors the many lagging requests through 311 that often sit or just go closed out without being addressed.
Faith?
So not only is a council member supposed to be a legislator, but also a representative of communities. And if there is a backlog, if things are getting stuck, if communities are not being heard, it is the responsibility of a council member to intervene on their behalf. But I also think that regular oversight and relationship building with the agency is important to make sure that that does not happen. So it will require relationship building with the agency and oversight and proactive activity, but making sure that if the community needs something, that you do intervene.
Thank you. So we got 2 more questions and then we'll move over to the closing statement. So we're going to start with, stick with you, Zachary. And encouraging sustainable transportation is great. What steps would you take to actively discourage driving? So what steps would you take to discourage driving in the ward? Starting with you, Zachary.
Yeah, I'll take the positive side of that. Incentivizing people to use public transportation or walking, I think, is both about expanding transportation opportunities and access, bus routes, for instance, e-bike subsidies, which is part of my Safe Streets platform, and making sure that we bring amenities closer to home. I also think it's about working with communities to look out for one another. There are a number of our seniors, for instance, that if they did not have to go to the grocery store or to do many of the chores that honestly they find difficult to do anyway, that they wouldn't. And so I'm also a big supporter of senior villages to make sure that we're looking out for one another, reducing the need for some of our neighbors to use cars, but also amplifying different modes of transportation like bus routes, e-bike subsidies, et cetera.
Thank you. Faith, what can we do to discourage driving?
So I would say sustainable for whom and to discourage driving for whom. We live in a very diverse community, and I know we have said that a lot. So I think it's great to bring amenities close to home. I think a lot of people would love that. But I think also, I don't believe that our ward anytime soon will get away from driving. I mean, again, the neighborhood I live in, there's a lot that we would have to do to address the lack of investment that has happened and also transportation and equity before we can really move in that direction. And that would require conversations with our community to make sure, again, that this can be sustainable for everyone within our community.
Thank you. Gordon.
Yeah, I really don't like the phrase discouraging driving because, again, we've all heard it. We have a very diverse ward. We have a lot of seniors. We have those that have disabilities, and you just have, single mothers, single parents that sometimes need that as well. So, but I do recognize the need that we must incentivize other modes of transportation. That's why in my plan, it's about increasing metro buses. It's about increasing bike shares. It's about increasing free bike shares for children, youth 18 and under. Those are things that we can do as well. But we got to remember, we got to make sure that we're taking care of seniors, older residents, those who are disabled, as well as those that want to use bikes. That's why you need a balanced leadership. And that's what I bring. Thank you.
Zachary?
I think we got Zach already.
Oh, sorry about
Can you repeat the question? Maybe I missed it.
I would love to hear. So this is a question coming from me, and this is a direct response from the question we just asked, because I know we have some folks in the audience in the chat who are talking about my mom has disabilities, as a result, can't drive, and not every disability is the same, and using it a cynical defense of car emoji. Some folks also said discouraging driving, then people cannot have, we cannot have people coming from Maryland and Virginia. And so someone also mentioned it's a direct assault on diversity of abilities. I would love to hear, and this is an issue that, you know, has been talked about quite frequently, I believe, in the transportation community, is how do we build an inclusive transportation system, an inclusive, sustainable transportation system for seniors and residents who have disabilities. And so I would love to hear your vision for seniors and residents who have disability to create a sustainable transportation system for them. What does that look like to you? So that's my question that I just literally just came up with on the spot.
Well, and to add to that, we also have a question from Samantha in the Q&A that speaks to this as well, which, you know, says that, of course, we, you know, need some seniors to retain their parking spaces, but sometimes people do age out of the ability to drive safely. And also some people can't drive at all. So I think to reframe the question, since some of you were, you know, asking for a positive spin on this, is it's okay if some people need to drive. We've all admitted that in this debate so far. But how are we going to make sure that people who don't or can't drive, you know, what are you going to do to accommodate them? And I would ask you, and I'm gonna let you go a little bit beyond as keeper of the time and give you each a minute to wrangle with the fact that often providing for people does mean overriding some of the pushback from communities to enable mobility for people who don't get that from a single occupancy vehicle. So there's some good discussions in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and start with Gordon. I'll give you a minute to address the really, really difficult balance of what do you need to do to ensure people who can't drive can access their life, the economy, their jobs, their families, just as seamlessly as often people who can drive.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a tough balancing act, but one that can be done. In Ward 5, we have a lot of seniors, especially those living in senior public housing. And a lot of those seniors, as well as seniors all around the ward, you know, do and have been in buses. So if we had buses that were dedicated to seniors and older populations, that's something that I would definitely agree with. However, we also have to make sure that, especially for senior public housing facilities, it's not just seniors that live in those facilities. You also have members of the disabled community and as well. And so we have to make sure that the service providers that bring buses to those areas will also allow the disabled community to utilize those buses, because right now, even in somewhere such as Green Valley Senior Apartments, who doesn't have just seniors in them, the bus service that comes there only is provided for seniors 65 and older. But there are many individuals living there who are under that age that can't utilize those services. So if we want to go that route, which I support, we just have to make sure that we contract with the right company that will service both the senior population as well as those with disabilities. So I would really utilize our bus system and increase that. Thank you.
Thank you. Faith?
So it would mean a really innovative approach, because sometimes busing can work and meet the needs, but also having a grandmother who we have set up transportation services for her, and sometimes the bus doesn't work. She needs to go at a different time, or she wants to go to a grocery store that's further away and has the particular produce that she wants. So it's making sure that we can have innovative solutions that can meet the unique needs of neighbors' lives and make sure that their life can be satisfying. So that could also mean having car shares that could be incentivized and paid for in order to support the needs of those neighbors. It also does mean bringing other amenities much closer and more easily accessible. And even thinking about sometimes having your groceries delivered or finding other innovative solutions that can make sure all of our neighbors can live the types of satisfying lives that they want. But it would just require innovation. And again, like as we've been out in the community, people offer these solutions. And we have other communities we can look to as well to have best practices and lessons learned.
Thank you. Zach?
Yeah, the vision for a healthy community is not just, again, a slogan. It is a quantifiable vision that we would push, and that would include safe streets. That would include a more inclusive design for all street and transportation resources. A few things I would highlight. As part of my Safe Streets platform, I call for a sidewalk strike team as part of DDOT. Right now, to put in a request for a sidewalk repair takes months, if it ever happens. And that should be happening in days or weeks. Many areas throughout Ward 5, because of tree stump growth or just because of the poor design of the sidewalk, someone in a wheelchair has to go into the street in order to get down the street safely, i.e. on Florida, i.e. on South Dakota or Rhode Island, and the list goes on. Secondly, I think it's about making sure that we provide access to not just those who may be disabled, but those who may have language barriers, who may want to take public transportation, whether they're deaf or whether they just speak a different language, but can't access it because of those barriers. And so we just need to think more holistically about how are we providing access to all neighbors to take advantage of public transportation, but also to be able to safely move down the street. Last thing I would say is funding.
Zach, I am going to wind you down.
Make sure we expand transportation options.
Thank you.
So we have one more question, and then we're going to move over to closing statements. And so
I'm bringing you back 30 seconds, by the way.
Last question for tonight. Again, all of these questions were submitted by Ward 5 residents. What can be done about the large trucks on residential streets causing damage to property? So this is a question that a Ward 5 resident is concerned about. What can be done about the large trucks on residential streets causing damage to property? So starting with you, Gordon.
Yeah, this is definitely an issue because large trucks, they create vibration issues, noise issues for residents alike. We have to make sure that large trucks have certain routes that they must go through, and if they go through other routes that's not part of that dedicated route, that there is some kind of enforcement, fines, or things of that nature. We also have to make sure that those routes and those trucks also are there at certain times of the day, right? Not when it's most crowded or populated. So those are two things already that I know as ANC commissioner we can do to reduce truck issues in our neighborhoods.
Faith?
Especially in communities where there's a lot of construction happening, we see this quite frequently in our evolving neighborhood. So I think enforcement is important. I've seen, as I've been on Twitter, like neighbors who are like, hey, this is blocking my way, or this is a problem. Why is this happening at this time of the morning? So responsiveness to those requests when neighbors are reporting that, and also making sure that there are designated routes. So not just a fine on that day, but also to the companies that we know are causing these problems within our communities.
Zachary?
So two things I would highlight. One, there are already laws on the books that requires contractors and agencies to provide safe accommodations for pedestrians for construction. That is rarely enforced. And so I think enforcing the laws we already have on the books is important, but I also think about like Eckington neighbors, where this is a reoccurring issue because trucks are moving through the community. And it's about how do you find the companies that are culprits of this or repeat offenders to just make sure that we protect the quality of life for our Ward 5 neighbors.
Thank you. So we're going to move into closing statements. So you'll have 1 minute. We're going to stick with you, Zachary, then we'll go Gordon, and then go you, Faith. So you have 1 minute closing statement. Starting with you, Zachary.
Yeah, no, thank you all for hosting this conversation. It is timely, it is important. And thank you to my colleagues for joining and adding to a rich discussion. You know, I, again, am fighting for a healthy Ward 5 where all neighbors are able to move freely and safely throughout our community. But I think this election provides an opportunity for us to reimagine a vision, a real vision zero. it is no secret that we have failed in this space. And I think that's often because in times like this, we have elected officials or candidates who say the right things. And then when it comes down to acting, they are usually missing in action. I think being in the nation's capital provides an opportunity for us to really be a leader in redesigning our streets, making sure we rethink enforcement, and just provide a range of transportation options for all Ward 5 neighbors, that we can move away from our car-centric design to putting people first, so that we can all live freely and safely in a healthier Ward 5. So again, thank you. If you're interested in learning more, please visit Zachary4ward5.com.
Thank you, Zachary. Gordon?
The number one issue with our campaign is safety. And so we want to make sure that we're reducing traffic fatalities and increasing overall transportation safety. That means we need speed bumps, speed humps. We need more four-way stop signs. Something else that many of us did not really talk about tonight, we need to shorten the time period for traffic safety investigations, because right now it takes about 130 days for any traffic safety investigation to come back. And that's a long time for a sidewalk repair, for roads to be fixed, anything like that. So we have to do better. We also have to make sure that we emphasize with DDOT that DDOT needs more engineers. I've talked to the DDOT representatives, and a lot of times they are just a barrier to the engineers. And the engineers are the ones that can help truly make our streets safer. So we need more engineers as well. So when you think 4 years down the line, I want you to think of a safer Ward 5, because that's the focus of our campaign. More speed bumps, more speed humps, and just overall reimagining of transportation in Ward 5, and also making sure that we enforce the laws around reciprocity. Thank you so much, and please visit my website, gordonforward5.com. It's been a privilege to be here. Have a great and safe evening.
Faith?
So I want to say thank you so much to all of the hosts for having this conversation tonight, and also for my colleagues for joining. I do think that it's really important that as we continue to live here in this community together, that of course we are not only paying attention to the times when the spotlight is shining bright, but also to the things that are happening when the spotlight isn't on at all. And we want to also make sure that we are living in a community that not only helps every community member feel like they have a sense of belonging, but it is safe. And our community has changed so much. Just like an aging house, our roads have aged. The way that we utilize them have aged, and we have to continue to double down on what we need to do. And we know what we need to do. There's a roadmap for what we need to do. There are the lived experiences of our neighbors. Each and every one of us have had an experience that lets us know what we need in our communities. So we do need a process where not only someone is giving accountability, but that we are making sure that community is at the core of what we are doing. And I'm so proud of the work that I've been able to do that has always had community at the core, and making sure that that is our guiding principle. And this is what we need in this space. We've had parents say it, community members, over and over and over again about what's needed, whether you are dealing with a disability or whether you're trying to get your child to school. So I'm excited about this opportunity, and I look forward to engaging more. And you can also visit my website at faithforward5dc.org. But we just need to build a stronger Ward 5 together, and that includes our safe streets and access to transportation. Thank you.
Let me thank you, Faith. Thank you to the candidates, Gordon, Zachary, Faith, and Zachary. I know you're really busy collecting petitions. I know they're due tomorrow. So I know you have your volunteers and yourselves out there knocking doors, collecting petitions, and talking to voters. So let me quickly say I really appreciate the time that you were able to afford us tonight. So I'm really thankful for that. Let me thank our co-sponsors, Black Millennials of Flint, Moms Clean Air Force, DC Chapter, the Coalition for Smarter Growth, DC Environmental Network, and Sunrise. Let me thank our co-host, Greater Washington, Alex Block. I'm gonna let her have the last words. If she has some last words.
Oh God, I didn't prepare any remarks. Thank you so much to everyone for tolerating my dinging, my aggressive cutoffs. I appreciate it. I really appreciated the opportunity to hear you all. We put you through a lot of topics. None of these are easy. None of these fit in 30 seconds. I spent my career on housing, transportation, and land use, and I know it's really hard to get it right in a soundbite. So thank you all for being here, putting yourself out there, and being honest in your responses. I hope that we can continue these conversations, and looking forward to other forums, other ways of discussing, other ways of chatting, and I'm sure everyone here is as well. So best of luck in your campaigns. I believe on the administrator side, this is recorded. We'll get it posted on Greater Washington at some point. WABA, GGWash, probably some of our other co-sponsors will be distributing it. Don't hesitate to reach out to Jeremiah or I if you have any questions in our respective organizations. And thank you so much again to our candidates.
Thank y'all. Good night.
Jeremiah, you need anything from me?